Uranus is the seventh planet from the Sun and the third largest in the solar system. Since it's called an ice giant, you might expect it to be a frozen ball of ice just flying through space. But that's not actually what ice giant means. Instead, it's composed of a thick soup of water, methane, and ammonia, which scientists call ices. Uranus is unique in that it appears to spin sideways because of the extreme tilt on its axis. It rotates nearly 90 degrees relative to the plane of its orbit, which gives it the nickname the Tilted Giant. This planet flies through space accompanied by 28 known moons and 13 faint rings. Being extremely far out from the Sun, Uranus is very cold and windy. Its atmosphere is mostly made of hydrogen and helium, but also contains water, ammonia, and methane. It's the methane that gives Uranus its blue-green color. Uranus formed alongside the rest of the solar system about 4.5 billion years ago. Along with its buddy Neptune, it probably formed closer to the Sun before moving further out and settling into its current position. Worlds roughly the size of Uranus are pretty common around other stars, so studying it can help us understand other star systems and help us figure out if ours is unique or not. So far, only one spacecraft has ever visited Uranus, and that was Voyager 2 back in the 1980s. The little robot discovered new moons and rings and measured the planet's magnetic field. Now, Uranus is only monitored using Earth-based instruments and telescopes, but it is possible we could see a mission to Uranus in the near future. Come along with me as I tell you more about the planet with the name that people like to make fun of the most. Unlike most other planets in the solar system, which have been known since ancient times, Uranus was the first planet discovered with a telescope. In fact, plenty of people saw it for a while, but they didn't realize it was a planet. They just assumed it was a star because it's so dim and moves so slowly. William Herschel accidentally found Uranus in 1781 while conducting a survey of all the stars. During this, he noticed that one of the stars was a little different from the others. Within a year, he realized the star he found was actually following a planetary orbit. About 2 years after this discovery, Uranus was widely accepted as a new planet, in part because of observations by Johann Elert Bode. Bode is the one who suggested the name for the planet, and he argued that because Saturn was named after the father of Jupiter, then this new planet should be named after the father of Saturn. Herschel, on the other hand, tried to name it Georgium Sidus after his patron, King George III. Georgium Sidus is Latin for George's star, but it became known as Uranus instead, and it is now the only planet in the solar system named after a Greek god rather than a Roman one. Uranus orbits at an average distance of 1.8 billion miles from the Sun, which is extremely far away. At this distance, sunlight takes about 2 hours and 40 minutes to reach the planet. Uranus completes one spin on its axis every 17 hours, and it completes one orbit around the Sun every 84 Earth years. The eccentricity of its orbit is very low, which just means the shape of its orbit deviates very little from a perfect circle. Uranus is the only planet in the solar system whose equator is tilted at nearly a right angle from the plane of its orbit. Its massive tilt of 97.77 degrees is likely the result of a collision with an object very long ago. It could also have come from a larger former ring system that caused the planet to wobble and tip over. And yet another theory suggests that a roughly Mars-sized moon orbiting opposite from Uranus's rotation crashed into it and knocked it sideways. The planet's unique tilt causes the most extreme seasons in the solar system. For nearly a quarter of each Uranian year, or about 20 Earth years, the Sun shines directly on one pole of Uranus, just plunging the other into a very cold, dark winter. The rotation of Uranus is also interesting because it's one of the only 2 planets in the solar system that rotates in an opposite direction compared to most of the others. Its lone friend in this regard is Venus. The diameter of Uranus at its equator is 31,763 miles, which makes it about 4 times wider than Earth. The gravity on Uranus is about 89% the strength of Earth's. Uranus is one of 2 icy giants in the outer solar system, with the other being Neptune. Most of its mass is made up of a hot, dense fluid of icy materials such as water, ammonia, and methane. This mantle surrounds a small rocky core of iron and magnesium silicate. It's the second least dense planet, with the first being Saturn. As an ice giant, it has no true surface, and most of its bulk is swirling fluids. Uranus is very, very cold. Its average temperature is just negative 320 degrees Fahrenheit, where its atmospheric pressure is equal to that of sea level on Earth. Near its core, though, temperatures increase drastically to over 9,000 degrees Fahrenheit. That's close to the surface temperature of the Sun. Not a whole lot about the structure of Uranus is known for sure. Only a single spacecraft has visited visited it, and that was nearly 40 years ago, and it's kind of hard to study something that far out with only what we have on Earth. We can make educated guesses and estimates though, which is sometimes all you can do with space. The atmosphere of Uranus is about 83% hydrogen, 15% helium, and then around 2% other gases like methane, water vapor, and ammonia. The planet gets its blue-green color from the methane. Sunlight passes through the atmosphere and is then reflected back out by the cloud tops. Methane absorbs the red portion of the light and reflects only the blue-green color. When Voyager 2 encountered Uranus in 1986, it saw only a few discrete clouds, a great dark spot, and a small dark spot. This made it seem like there just wasn't a whole lot going on in the Uranian atmosphere. But more recent observations have revealed dynamic clouds around the time of equinox. This includes rapidly changing bright features. This happens because when the seasons change, sunlight reaches some parts on Uranus for the first time in Earth decades, and this causes heating in the atmosphere that triggers gigantic storms. Despite not being the furthest planet out from the sun, Uranus has the coldest planetary atmosphere in the solar system. It has little to no internal heat to supplement the heat it receives from the sun. The reason why is a bit of a mystery. The planet could be hot at the interior and the heat is just trapped, or it could have lost its primordial heat through some kind of impact or an other unknown process. Basically, scientists aren't too sure why Uranus is so cold. Winds on Uranus can reach speeds of up to 560 miles per hour. Near the equator, the winds blow in the opposite direction of the planet's rotation. Closer to the poles, though, the winds switch direction and flow with the planet's rotation. Uranus may also feature diamond rain. This might occur because carbon and hydrogen compress under the intense heat and pressures found deep within the planet's atmosphere, forming diamonds. These then sink downward and eventually settle around the core. The same process is thought to occur on Neptune as well. Uranus has an unusual and irregularly shaped magnetosphere. Although magnetic fields are typically in alignment with a planet's rotation, the one around Uranus is different. The planet's field is tilted nearly 60 degrees from its axis of rotation. This field is also offset from the center of Uranus by about 1/3 of its radius. The offset causes the magnetic field to be about 10 times stronger at the northern hemisphere's surface than at the southern's. A 2017 study suggested the strange alignment of the magnetic field could cause it to flicker on and off with every rotation. The magnetic field of Uranus is also unusual because of the relatively large size of its small-scale components. This suggests the field is generated at shallow depths within Uranus, and thus the planet's interior must become electrically conductive closer to the surface than on Jupiter, Earth, or Saturn. This inference is consistent with knowledge about the planet's internal composition. The presence of a magnetic field means auroras do occur on Uranus, but they aren't in line with the planet's poles like they are on Earth, Jupiter, and Saturn. This, of course, comes from the very lopsided magnetic field. The tail of Uranus's magnetosphere extends behind it in the opposite direction of the sun for millions of miles. The planet's sideways rotation twists the magnetic field lines into a very long corkscrew shape. Currently, Uranus is orbited by 28 known moons. These moons are named after characters from the works of William Shakespeare and Alexander Pope. All the inner moons appear to be roughly half water ice and half rock. The composition of the outer moons remains unknown, and they're likely captured asteroids. The Voyager spacecraft revealed the moons of Uranus to be surprisingly diverse worlds. They feature surfaces both young and old, volcanoes, impact features, massive plumes and geysers, deep canyons, subsurface oceans, and even clues to environments that could support primitive and simple forms of life. The 5 largest moons of Uranus, in ascending order of size, are Miranda, Ariel, Umbriel, Oberon, and Titania. Oberon and Titania might have liquid water underneath their surfaces because of heating from gravitational tugs by Uranus and other moons. The largest 2 moons were discovered by William Herschel in 1787. William Lassell discovered Ariel and Umbriel, and nearly a century after that, Gerard Kuiper found Miranda in 1948. In 1986, Voyager 2 discovered 10 more moons: Juliet, Puck, Cordelia, Ophelia, Bianca, Desdemona, Portia, Rosalind, Cressida, and Belinda. In the years since, astronomers using the Hubble telescope and ground-based instruments have increased the total to 28 moons. More recent moons have been very difficult to spot from such a great distance. Between Cordelia, Ophelia, and Miranda is a swarm of 8 small satellites that are clustered together so closely that astronomers aren't too sure how they haven't crashed into each other. Anomalies in the rings of Uranus suggest the existence of even more moons. Uranus may even have a collection of Trojan asteroids. These are objects that share the same orbit as the planet in a special region known as the Lagrange point. Despite claims that Uranus's Lagrange point would be too unstable to host Trojan asteroids, one was discovered in 2013. The rings of Uranus were first observed by scientists using Earth-based telescopes in the Kuiper Airborne Observatory. They were the first rings to be seen around a planet after Saturn's. James L. Elliott and his colleagues found them in 1977, 9 years before the Voyager 2 encounter. The rings were discovered when they caused the light of a star to flicker as they passed in front of it. Voyager 2 took the first pictures of the rings, which are narrow and fairly opaque. They consist mostly of larger particles greater than 4.6 feet across. Uranus's rings can be separated into two sets. First is the inner system of 9 rings. These ones are mostly narrow and dark gray in color. Then there are the outer 2 rings. The innermost of these two is reddish, like the dusty rings found elsewhere in the solar system. The other is blue, like Saturn's E ring. In order of increasing distance from Uranus, the rings are named Zeta, 6, 5, 4, Alpha, Beta, Eta, Gamma, Delta, Lambda, Epsilon, Nu, and Mu. The names are a bit of a mixed bag. Why do 3 have numbers and the rest are named after Greek letters? I couldn't really tell you. Some of the larger rings are surrounded by belts of fine dust. A study in 2016 suggested that the rings of Uranus, as well as those of Neptune and Saturn, could be the remains of dwarf planets that wandered a little bit too close to the bigger ones. This caused them to be torn apart by gravity and are now preserved as rings. So that would be pretty metal. That's Uranus. Please try to be mature about the name. I know it's not easy, but really, any joke you can make has probably been made about a dozen times already. I find this planet utterly fascinating, and it's such a shame that we don't really know more about it, but it is kind of hard to study it when it's like all the way out there in the solar system, and the only spacecraft that's ever encountered it was Voyager 2 nearly 40 years ago. It is possible we could see a future mission to Uranus, although it would take a very long time for a spacecraft to reach it. As in, like, nearly a decade, probably, if not more than a decade. So even if they do send a little robot out to Uranus, we'll be waiting a very long time before it gets there. I hope you enjoyed this little coverage of Uranus. Like always, I'll be making a separate video on its moons, and at least I will have a much easier time with that than I did with Saturn's moons, because there's fewer of them. Far fewer. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and have a good day.